Hi everyone, my name is Martha Mock. I am your host today for the guest speaking session. And it's so amazing that we have all these wonderful experts coming into our group to share their knowledge, their experience, and they only have one purpose is to serve you and to support you. So today I have an amazing guest. She is from America, so thank you for recording this session with me at such an early time at your end. So here is Keely. She is a trauma recovery expert. She supports women healing from toxic relationship and she focuses on helping women to break the cycle and to reclaim their power and to step into their most confident, trusted version of themselves. So allow me to introduce Keely to come onto our show. Hello, Keely. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Martha. Thank you so much for having me. I know it's like getting late your end, so thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. So please tell us a little bit more about you and your experience.
Yeah, of course. So prior to becoming a therapist and coach, I was actually a family lawyer here in the UK for 8 years. So I've dealt with divorce, I've dealt with like domestic abuse, I've dealt with a wide range of things legally. And then I decided to transfer over to retrain as a psychotherapist over here. And so now that's what I do. I'm a trauma psychotherapist, a trauma coach, and I support women primarily dealing with healing after toxic abusive relationships, divorces, all those kind of encompassing things, so they can step into their best version of themselves, because I know it's tricky. I've been there myself personally. My childhood, a little bit about that. I had quite a rough upbringing in terms I was in a domestically abusive household. I then kind of carried the same patterns through my own relationships as I obviously evolved and grew up, until I did the work on myself. I got so sick and tired of my own patterns and behaviors that I did the work, and now I'm here to support women who are going through just the same things.
It is so true. A lot of us don't know there is another way because even for myself, I look at my parents and they're being Asian. They will be that very dominant household where the man is the very dominant one and my mom always take the blame for it. And I keep seeing their relationship like this and I didn't know it was toxic. I didn't know that like what is the meaning of having narcissistic behavior from your partner. And when I went into my relationship and when my partner was treating me like that, I thought, oh, okay, that's what my parents did. They're still doing it. So it must be acceptable and it's okay. And not until later on, when I got the opportunity to meet amazing people like you, that I realized that, oh, this is not why. I look at other people, like what made me reflect on is I remember going into a job, I do weddings for a living as well. And I seeing the couple so happy. And I'm like, wow, I wish that in my own home, I could be this happy. And I think it's that moment of realization that made me think that, wow, I wasn't really as happy as what I think I am. I am married, but it's like I'm living with a housemate. So all of that have got me into the thinking of, I'll be amazing to learn a little bit more about ourselves and our trauma. Just like you have been through a lot. You have come from a place that you don't know what's better. And I'm so proud of you for becoming who you are right now and being able to share with us all. So let's touch up on this. How do you know if you're in a toxic relationship? What are the signs that we should look for?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. Firstly, I think it's really important that people know that it comes normally from our childhood, because between the ages of 0 and 7, we're essentially like a sponge. And so we absorb the world around us and we don't know any different until we see different, right? So that's really
Yeah.
interesting to see that you kind of recognized your own patterns from your own childhood and you were able to kind of reflect upon that. That's like really, really powerful for you. So I love that. But in terms of how do we know? So I think the first thing to recognize is that we always have a feeling. We might not cognitively know, but in our gut, we always will have a feeling something's off. And so we might not know exactly what is off. We can't pinpoint it, but we'll have the feeling. And so I like to kind of think of we have two types of, we have covert abuse and we have overt abuse. So overt abuse is more physical, you know, it's quite obvious, whereas covert abuse is more subtle. And
Mm,
it can sometimes be hard to catch the covert abuse
mm,
initially because we don't necessarily, you know, see the big signs. So a couple of things that you can look for to identify is one, obviously that feeling something's not right. Even if you don't know what it is, it's definitely worth sitting with and kind of exploring. But also when we are kind of having to say to our friends and family, everything's fine, and it's really not. If we're having to censor what we're saying or we can't be truthful, that's another really big red flag for me. In terms of behaviors to look for, there are things like gaslighting. So that's essentially where if I tell you, Martha, the sky is blue, and you say to me, no, it's not, it's pink. And I'm like, no, I definitely know it's blue. And you're like, no, Keely, it's really pink. And then I start to question, this, is the sky pink? Is it blue? You know, that kind of confusion and questioning your own reality. That's the easiest way to describe gaslighting that I would tell anyone who would like to know about that. And then there are obviously the other like kind of subtle things. So putting you down very often, criticizing you. We have a thing called negging, so it's like a backhanded compliment. So, oh, like I think that you're really pretty for somebody who's blonde. And it's like, oh, that's not really quite a compliment. That's a bit of a backhanded one. That one quite often gets overlooked. Like, very often I see that it happens often. I mean, especially in like TV shows and things, it will happen and we'll be like, oh, okay, that feels a bit messy. There's obviously the overt signs of it. So obviously anything physically abusive is a straight red flag. Absolutely, we're not going there. But there are quite a few little signs, but I think they're the most important ones to kind of, if something doesn't feel right, we need to question what doesn't feel right.
that is so true because like a few of things that you said, I was like, oh, I didn't even know that it was actually a behavior. I'm like, yeah, yeah, why that you're saying it, it is so true too. And a lot of us that who come out from it, it is such a toll on our personality, on our mental state, and that sense of feeling of loss of and confusion of where can I go from here? How do I heal from this? I remember on my journey, I was very grateful that I met some wonderful friends that who are in the like mental health stage. I still remember one day that my ex-husband called me, and the only reason he called me is only for money. So even after we separated, I'm living in my other house. Every time he called, it will be about money. So I developed this fear that every time that phone ring, I see his name, I was starting to shake, and it's like that feeling. And my friend did one thing for me, and I'm still forever grateful for that. He saw me shaking, and he turned my phone, pushed the button so it's silent, turn it around once it finished ringing, and he blocked this number for me. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that. Really? I could block him? I could cut him out of my life? Oh, wow. That was such an enlightenment for me. And I know it sounds so stupid right now. Oh, you just need to push the block button. But at that moment, I didn't even think of that was a possibility or option. And I think that's going into like, how do we heal from that? How do we realize that there is other options and other action that we can do to moving on onto the next things?
Yeah, so oh, bless your heart. I'm sorry you had to experience that. That's awful. I mean, it's very common. So after we've been in these kind of toxic, messy relationships, the stats actually say that it kind of increases after we go through a breakup. So it's obviously quite a safe and like or unsafe and fragile period for us to go through.
Mm,
So bless your heart for going through that. But yes, your friend, absolute lifesaver.
that's really
The first
amazing.
thing I was going to say is I would tell everyone and anyone, and I know that there'll be external circumstances like we have children and things like that, but to block and delete them. So if it's clear cut and you don't have children, you don't have to have communication, block and delete them. Because as you're saying, what's happening to you is there's a bit of fear conditioning going on. So you've now associated in your brain, rightly so, that obviously your ex-husband now rings the little amygdala, which is our alarm system in our brain, saying that there's a threat. And so your body goes into a fight or flight response. And
Mm,
that's not going to be productive to your healing because whilst we're still in that, you know, insecure and unstable nervous system reaction, we actually can't start to heal.
right.
So the first thing, block and delete them. if you have children or you have reasons that you have to kind of have communication with them, say you're selling a property through the divorce, there's two options. We can kind of do a thing where we have a third party involved. So maybe there's a grandparent or an aunt or uncle who can kind of do exchange with the children, or exchange kind of conversationally. But also with parents, there's a thing called grey rock, is a technique. And it basically is where you treat it like a business transaction. And so when they come, it's very short, sharp, and nothing else needs to be discussed. There's an amazing like apps out there now. There's like Family Wizard where it's just an app and you can only communicate each other that way. So, you could put the notifications on silent and just check them once a day, obviously if your children aren't there. But say in the week time and the children are with you, you could put the app on silent in your notifications and just check in once a day. So you take the power back. You have the control over when this person is entering your life. Alongside that, so say that you're still having to do drop off and pick up with yourself, they're coming to your home, they just stay at the door, they don't get to come in. And it's very much like, here's the child, here's their things, there's nothing else needs to be discussed. If they try to interact with you, you just tell them, like, we're here to talk about the child, and that's that. And you just be very like a business transaction. It's very straight faced. We're here to talk about business, and that's that. But also, I would say one of the most important things to do is to regulate your nervous system. As we just obviously, as you mentioned, when it's up and down, it's very hard. So there's a thing called self-soothing, and you probably heard about it actually in relation to children. But as adults, we can still self-soothe. And I think we don't really get taught this, we forget this. And so I can't go through all of the possible things we could do now. But if you go onto Pinterest and put in self-soothing techniques, you will have a whole array of ideas and solutions. So it could be taking a walk outside, having a candlelit bath, just having like a sense of smell that you like lavender, for example, something that will help you calm your nervous system. And that's going to be really, really crucial. That is the first step of healing, because as I say, till you're regulated, you can't really do the inner work. And then after we've got all the good healing stuff in terms of self-soothing, then we're going to have to start to kind of reverse engineer how we got here. We need to now start doing what I call a like life timeline. We look at our childhood, as we've seen with your parents. It normally stems back to something, and that will then show us our core wounds. And then from the core wounds, we can kind of see how we got to where we are now, because self-awareness in your healing journey is absolutely key. If there's a one thing I could give everyone, it would be a level of self-awareness, because once you see something, you cannot unsee it. And so when we're aware of our patterns and how we show up in relationships and the things that we accept and we don't, then we can see where that's coming from. Because behind every core wound, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, that's how we then end up in these relationships. So that, I know it's quite a lot, but I think the most core things are to obviously cut the contact, learn to self-soothe, and then start the self-awareness process journey, just to kind of start to unpack that. But it kind of has to be done in that order. So when we're treating trauma, we have stabilization, which is a self-soothing. We then have the processing of the trauma, and we can't process trauma until we feel safe in our bodies, because there's a real high risk we will re-traumatize ourselves. And then we have the embodiment. And so once we've done all the processing, then we can start looking at our core values, our boundaries, our values, our standards, our deal breakers, what we want for our life, how that looks for us. Then once we're strong enough within ourselves, we can start to assert those. And then that's when the embodiment comes in. So then I like to call it renew. We just renew ourselves at this point. So we're still the same person. We're just a new and improved and renewed, stronger version of ourselves at the end of it.
Yeah, that is so valuable, because I know that a lot of the women in our group here has children, and it makes it very difficult to actually arrange that process. So when I post this up tonight, once we actually upload it into all of this, can I trouble you to comment in there, putting those apps and technique that you actually mentioned into the comment, because I think this will value so many of us here, and definitely our audience. I know, yeah, Keely is amazing. I know. And I will be doing a longer session with her later, and to go into a specific things that you want. So when you see this video, if there's a particular question that you wanted to ask, or some area that you're unsure about, feel free to reach out to her. She is in our group. She is one of our experts here. So feel free to be able to reach out and know that you are not alone in this fight, because I know how hard it is to be betray, it could be a betrayal, it could be a heartbreak, it could be just two people who stop loving each other and move on to a different stage of a relationship. So from being in a couple relationship to being a co-parenting or relationship that you're going to go through. And it is hard when other people, especially children, are involved. But like here, Kelly here has taught us that there is a way that we can deal with all of this, and which it really aligns with me because I always say that if you can use logic to kill emotion, everything is a lot better. And that's why a good businessman doesn't have a lot of emotion when they are dealing their business. And I know that a lot of other people may say, oh, like, that's like, she's so cool. She's like, really cool. Like, that's not fair and stuff like that. But sometimes when we're too kind in a situation, it doesn't actually give us benefit. It doesn't actually give us protection. We need to realize that we are the one that who needs to fight for ourselves and realize that we also need that protection. Because only when you can protect yourself, you got the extra to protect the people around you, especially your children that may be involved. This has been just so amazing. It is wonderful talking about this kind of thing. And I'm going to extend this session a little bit longer because I know everyone wants to know about it. For me, one of the things that I have learned about moving to the next stage is I stopped saying a word moving on, which a lot of us actually say. Instead, I use something called moving forward because in my head, that if I move on, I'm carrying all the baggages that I have in the past and looking back at my fear and try to jack that bag of worries like a Santa bag and drag it with me towards my goal. And I find that requires so much willpower and it's very, very difficult to keep going. So instead of doing that, I tell people to go and do some closure. Do the funeral that you need for your relationship. Give the closure that you need for your relationship so you can finally settle, heal, like what you said. Because when you're not ready to move on to the next stage. Give yourself the time to recognize, acknowledge it before you keep moving on the process. So you can move forward without the baggage and looking into your future with excitement. So if from your point of view, Keely, what would you say that can help us to realize that we need to move forward instead of like getting stuck in a certain space?
Yeah, I love your reframe. That's so powerful to kind of like just not move on, but to actually move forward. I love that. That's great. Yeah, so I would say obviously again, feel your feelings and the closure. Oftentimes we look for closure from the other person, like if we just have one last conversation, if he just tells me or they just tell me why, and we don't need that at all. That's actually just our brain's way of staying attached to this person. And there's a whole load around that I could talk about. But in terms of this, we need to understand firstly that we can give the closure to ourselves. So the reason the relationship broke down is the closure. Their behavior, if it was messy, is the closure. And actually that's us taking our power back. So in order to move forward, we need to take our power back. We need to sit with our emotions, process them, like you're saying. But then also we need to do a lot of work around self-trust, around self-compassion. The two things go hand in hand. We cannot be compassionate, or we cannot start to rebuild self-trust if we're not compassionate. If we're still there, beating ourselves over the head with like, why didn't you see this? Why did you stay so long? Why? We're still keeping ourselves stuck in that place. Again, accept it as it is. We did the best we could with the tools we had at the time. This is how it played out, but now I have a choice, because it always comes down to a choice. We always have a choice. Sometimes it might not be clear, but there'll be one. And so when we start to sit with ourselves with compassion, again, accept it and just say, okay, that's fine. It is what it is. We can then start to trust ourselves, because a lot of the times I find that we're not worried to kind of start again. The thing that we are scared about is that we're scared that what if that happens again? But if we
Mm,
trust ourselves and we recultivate the self-trust, It doesn't matter how other people show up because I trust that I now have the wisdom from what I've just been through. I've worked on myself, so I have the tools to notice, to recognize anything. And also, I now have the tools and the resilience that if this person in the future, if we're talking about dating, was to ghost me, cheat on me, do whatever to me, that's their behavior. It's not okay, but I know I'm going to be okay. And so it's about that inner knowing that I'm going to be okay regardless of what happens. But that can only happen when we rebuild the self-trust. So a little tip to start rebuilding self-trust now is say to yourself, okay, Martha, every day I'm going to sit with myself for 10 minutes and read. And then you quite literally sit with yourself for 10 minutes and read, because we have to retrain ourselves that we can do these things. Because a lot of times when we're in messy relationships or we stayed too long or whatever the reason is, we've betrayed ourselves on some level. Because as I was saying earlier, we know when something's not right. A lot of us stay way past the time we know we should have left. So then we obviously learn that we can't trust ourselves. We can't trust our decisions because we're still beating ourselves around the head with you stayed too long. So do you see how it kind of is like a circle and it all interlinks? So yeah, commit to one promise that you're going to do to yourself every day. It doesn't have to be long, it just has to be consistent. So consistency is really, really key. And you can start doing that literally today.
That is so true. And that's just such a valuable advice of helping us to break down the process that we need to go through. Because I know a lot of us here don't know what to do next. Don't know, oh, I just got separated a few months ago and now I'm completely in denial, or I just, my brain doesn't even know where to function. So I believe that by listening to what we just said, they have starting to have an understanding of the process that they need to go through. So today I am again so grateful for your wonderful sharing with us. Keely, you have been absolutely amazing. You are a star. You are going to help so many of us here to be able to find ourselves again, to build the trust that we need to build back into ourselves so we can begin to find our happiness again. And I always say that it is a choice if you want to look for a real new relationship, or do you want to actually keep by yourself. It is a personal choice. No one can judge us on that. And if we want to, we don't have to be ashamed just because we are a bit older, we have children, and we have been through a little bit more than others. We have our richness that make us special and unique. So all of us here listening, realize this. Doesn't matter who you are, as long as that you realize you are lovable and you are deserving of love, compassion, and support, there is always a space for you. So that brings us to the end of today's show. So thank you once again for Keely for sharing your valuable message. And I look forward to see you next time. And thank you again for our audience here today. And I look forward to see you all on another topic next Wednesday. See you later. Thank you.